Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. My name is Sarah Ann Minkin. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Foundation. Today is July 19th, 2023, and I am grateful to be here today with Basel Adraa and Yuval Abraham. Basel and Yuval have worked together on a number of projects, and most recently, they're the co-authors of an excellent article about Masafer Yatta in the South Hebron Hills, published last week as the cover article of The Nation. Entitled, "The Destruction of This Palestinian Community Was Green-Lighted by Israel's Supreme Court," their article is a joint project of The Nation, 972, and Local Call, where Basel and Yuval publish regularly. Listeners of this podcast may recall Basel from past webinars and podcasts. So glad that you're back here again with us, Basel, today, and Yuval, that you're joining us for the first time. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I want to start by asking you to introduce yourselves to our audience. Just tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and how it is that you came to write this article and to work together on this project and many other projects.
You start. So I live here in a small community called Twani, and one of the communities of Masafer Yatta. I born and raised here. I'm still living here, and I'm an activist, also journalist. Started in the last 3 years writing articles for 972 and Local Call about what's happening, mostly in Masafer Yatta, but also from other places in the West Bank, about the occupation and settlers attacks. And in the past year, this decision about Masafer Yatta from the Israeli High Court came out after 2 decades of the legal battle. So we felt that we need more, to do more advocacy work about what's happening in Masafer Yatta to try to raise this issue to the world. So this is how we came to write this, specifically the article on The Nation, to write everything that we could about Masafer Yatta to let the people know about this community.
Yeah, and I can just say that, I met Basel for the first time 6 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. I grew up 30 minutes from here. I'm an Israeli citizen. I grew up in the Negev, and I got exposed to home demolitions happening to Palestinian citizens of Israel around where I was born. And afterwards, I saw this policy happening in Jerusalem. And when I studied Arabic and I started meeting more and more Palestinians, I realized how systematic it is. And the first time I met Basel, I think all these years ago, I came here, Basel, we talked on the phone, and there was a demolition happening in Basel's home. Not his home, but right next to it. They were demolishing some sheep structure. And this policy of systematic home demolitions, I find it to be very, very shocking and very violent, and really a symptom of Israel's colonial policies all over. And I think, what we're trying to do also in this article is through telling this story of the community that Basel lives in, and that is at imminent risk of an ethnic cleansing, of a forced transfer, to also say something about the general policies happening in this land that we are living in. Yeah.
Thank you both so much, and we're going to talk more about the home demolitions and how they work specifically in Masafer Yatta and what it means more broadly. I'm going to ask you more questions about that. So thank you for starting us there, and Basel also for referencing the May 2022 Israeli Supreme Court decision, which we're also going to come back to. But before we talk more about Masafer Yatta, here you are, an Israeli citizen and a Palestinian living under occupation, working together on this article. And Basel had an experience just a few days ago on Saturday. Today is Wednesday. Just a few days ago, on the Jewish Shabbat, that was really an experience that is emblematic of the difference in regimes that you live under. We planned this podcast when the article came out last week, but what happened since then, one of the things that happened since then is that Basel, and I'm going to ask you to tell us about it in a moment, Basel, but you were in the village in Masafer Yatta of Mufagara, and you were covering an attack there by settlers. And one of the first times that you and I recorded a podcast, Basel, you had just been in Mufagara covering an attack by settlers, and you talked to us. And I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes. It was really a pogrom that settlers committed in that village. But a few days ago, you were back there again, documenting another settler attack, and you were detained and arrested by. Well, tell us about what happened, please, and how you're doing now.
Well, so I was called by the shepherds in around Mufaggara and like around their village. They told me that there is settlers grazing in their field and their crops. So I went there to film this settler that come like every day almost. Like this kind of harassments happening every day, like even in the moment that we are sitting and talking, there are settlers in these fields that keep coming, and there's a policy behind it. It's not happening by chance that the Israeli state give the settlers like what they call it, the state land to live in it, and they use the settlers' violence and the physical violence by settlers to take over the Palestinian special properties where the state can't take this land directly. So they send the settlers to do this daily harassments against Palestinians until they would give up and leave from this land, and they would also annex this land as like to legitimize the stealing of this land. So this is part of the bigger picture and the policy of like stealing the land and controlling it and taking it for those settlers. So I went there, I started to film. Another settler came with a stick, started to harass the people and taking photos of their faces and walking between their sheep. Another one came with a car and started to drive crazy after them. And there have been clashes because Palestinians were running in front of the car and behind the car. So he claimed to the army in the moment they arrived that the Palestinians throw stones at him. So heavy forces, like about 30 soldiers, came to my village 20 and invaded the houses and started to search for Palestinian like youth under claim they throw stones. And I stayed there in the field with the old shepherds, and the settlers continued to graze in the special provided tours of police were there. And the police didn't ask anything about this. We kept asking him to take away the settler because this is how it started. It's because of this settler come every day to this crops. And he just kept ignoring. And like an hour later, while the army were invading the houses in one jeep just headed up to the place of in Mufaggara, and like he spoke to the settlers with the settler for a while. I heard my name really loud by the settlers while he's speaking to the soldiers because they know me very well. So the soldier, like the officer, came directly to us where we were standing and asked me if I was there. I told him yes. So he just catch me from my arm, taking me for a few meters away from everyone, asked me to give him the ID and the phone, and ask another soldier to search my body. And then asked me to he said, open your phone and show me what you were filming here. And he showed me that he have a picture from the settler that took it to prove that I was filming this accident. So I told him I can't, this is my journalist ID. I'm a journalist and you can't just do it like this. There is 2 police cars here and didn't ask anything, and they're supposed to investigate this case. And he said, yes, but this will take time to go through the law to take the videos from you, and I don't have time. So you have 2 ways, or to give me the phone now, open it, and give me the videos, or there is a longer way to take these materials from your phone. I said to him, this is still illegal and you can't just do it like this. He said, okay. He called another like army jeep that came there like after 1 minute almost, and asked the soldiers just to take me away, and they bring me behind the jeep. They start handcuffing me. The sucker still like there next to the soldiers, start to cursing me, and this is good for me to be arrested. And the soldiers were smiling and raising his middle finger. And they just put me inside the jeep, also covered my eyes and start to drive. And then they transfer me from a jeep to a car. And then to the military base, they make me sit on chair in the sun. And now it's really, there's heat wave that's going on in this past week. And soldiers were really laughing and drinking water, and they come like close to my ear, like, and telling me a dog and these things, and ask me like bullshits and tell me like, why you don't go to Jenin if you're working at Al Jazeera. They were like, just like, it's fun for them, I guess. This is why they were doing it. After like several hours, the officer came back and put me in the jeep and take me back to the entrance of Twani and filmed me. He said, want to film that I'm giving you back your phone and ID. And just, I was released. Later on, they said that I was taken only for testimony, for investigation, which is all lies. Like, it was like kind of just punishment that they wanted to do it to me for like filming that. I mean, this is like part of the daily life here. Like, I am because journalists, because I have this press card really brought attention, but literally there is like almost daily of this going on, especially for the normal Palestinians, for shepherds, like how and it's part of how they're stealing land. This is, I beg to say it, because it is like this, like many shepherds around here, Masafer Yatta and in the South Hebron area in Jordan Valley. So settler go graze in their field and called the army, said he was throwing stone at me. And just a simple shepherd that want to graze his sheep, the soldiers would put him like in a military jeep and start driving him like around, beating them up, putting them in military base. And then at midnight, they will release them close to a settlement or nowhere, and making them like suffering going back home. And a lot of time they will arrest them, take them to the police. It's really fake like issues. And then they would take them several days to the jail, and then they have to pay like thousands of shekels. And this shepherd will start to think, if I'm paying all this price just to feed my sheep, and my sheep want to get like food for my family, and I'm paying really higher than what I'm getting from this land and from this grazing. So they would give up, and why they would go rescue their like life resource and their life in this occupation, because and this is became like the ugly thing about it is normalized, this like daily harassments and violating the international law, international human rights law. So yeah.
Thank you for putting that into that context for us. First of all, I'm sorry that happened to you on Saturday, and that they held you with your hands bound and your eyes covered in the hot sun in a heat wave, and held you in that way. And as you've written and spoken about, and as we've been talking about over here at the foundation, also that this increase of Israeli harassment of Palestinian journalists, and of course there's the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh a year ago, which stands out as it should. And then what you just said, this is the normalizing of this kind of harassment and the experience of shepherds, and this normalizing of harassment by the settlers and by the military, and it makes them question whether or not they can even stay. And so I want to ask you both to talk about, so you said that you wanted to write this article because a year ago in May, the Supreme Court made a decision that after 2 decades of a legal process, the Supreme Court greenlit the expulsion of the communities from the firing zone in Masafer Yatta. You wrote in your piece, I'm gonna quote you back to you. You said, "The mass expulsion of Masafer Yatta's residents has not yet been carried out, but the lives of all the people of these villages have changed beyond recognition in the months since the ruling." Will you talk to us about those changes? What's changed in the past year?
Yeah, you want to start a little bit? Yeah, so maybe a little before that, just hearing Basel talk, I was thinking in my head, how impossible it is for an Israeli journalist to get that kind of treatment from soldiers. And it's literally it's not just a matter of discrimination, of a personal choice. There are, a settler and a shepherd from here are under 2 different systems of law. I don't know if the listeners know this, So
Tell
Basel
us,
sitting
lay it all out for us.
Yeah, so Basel, I mean, we're sitting here together, right? And we're both journalists and we're both writing for the same media outlets. But Basel is living under a military law, and I'm living under a civil law, which means, for example, there are a lot of differences. For example, if you're under military law, you can be a 12-year-old child and you can be sent to prison for up to 6 months. An Israeli child cannot, that he's 12 years old. A soldier can stop you and search you with no warrant. Just any decision. Military law allows that. You cannot do that to an Israeli journalist. You can be, without seeing a judge, from between 72 to 96 hours under the military law, you can be arrested. Soldiers can take you before you even meet a judge. It can be for no reason. I mean, I remember this happened to Basel's father, for example. Many times, soldiers come to his home, they take his father, and then they release him, 48 hours later with no interrogation, with nothing. And really, it's a very systemized sort of thing, and it's not random that Israeli journalists or Israeli settlers are getting one treatment and Palestinians are getting another. I mean, and I think this this is one reason why a lot of people are calling this regime that is in place an apartheid regime. And there are many reasons, and I think the story of Masafer Yatta, and to answer your question, Sarah, shows it as well. Yeah, but I just wanted to make that note, so as you said, I mean, just to give maybe a little bit of historical context. So Israel has been trying to forcefully transfer and evict the residents living in Masafer Yatta from the first days of the occupation. This is a very, very long process. This region was already, a month after the West Bank was occupied, it was already highlighted, in the Alon Plan as a region that Israel wanted to keep under its control, a region it wanted to annex because it is very close to the border. It's in the southern tip of the West Bank. And I won't get into the entire history because we don't have that much time, but of course, settlements were built here and a lot of violence related. I mean, we're a few minutes away near Basel's home from Havat Ma'on, which is really an extremist outpost. You can Google the name and really, history of violence and forced expulsion. And in 1999, so that's 24 years ago, Ehud Barak was the prime minister of Israel. It was a government that had also left-wing parties such as Meretz, and they had a mass forced transfer of most of the residents of Masafer Yatta. They actually took them from their homes. We interviewed some of them, some of the older people that remember this for the article. They placed them onto trucks. They went village after village, and they ethnically cleansed 700 people from this region. And the reason they did so in this really twisted way was because negotiations were happening between Israel and the PLO, and because of that, this twisted logic that they want to keep this region under Israeli control. So if they use this violence to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, the chances that in a final negotiation this region remains under Israeli control is higher. And these 700 people, hundreds of families were expelled. They went to the Israeli High Court. So Palestinians, they cannot vote. They cannot influence the laws that control them. But the Israeli High Court took responsibilities related to the occupied territories in 1967, and it allowed Palestinians to appeal against the Israeli military's decisions.
Before you say more about the court, this history is excellent, and I'm going to ask you to keep going. I want to interject just for one quick moment to say that, and to offer our listeners that we'll have links, of course, to the article where you talk about all of this, but also to our podcasts and discussions we've had on the Supreme Court decision, and also with someone who was ethnically cleansed, who was removed, forced expulsion in that 1999 expulsion when he was a small child, Ali Awad. who is someone we've had on before and talks about his family and has written about his family. And you, Basel, the two of you are part of a project of writing about Masafer Yatta together that we also really love to highlight. And we're going to have links to all of this. And so I'm just interrupting you to tell the listener that there is so much more to dig into and to see. Yuval, you're doing a beautiful job of summarizing and presenting this case and this story to us. So please continue. So Palestinians who can't vote for representation, who have no political representation under occupation, have historically been able to appeal to the Israeli Supreme Court. And after the 1999 expulsion, they went to the Supreme Court. Now pick up for us.
Exactly. Yeah. And just if you want to imagine how that looks like, because it's really shocking for me, it was at least to see, the Supreme Court, especially after seeing so many home demolitions and so much violence happening here on the ground. You go to Jerusalem, to this squeaky clean place, with beautiful, they made this, this amazing architecture. And these judges were, wearing these robes and are very formal looking. And in the crowd, in the seats, you have soldiers sitting down who are actually expelling these people. And you have farmers from Masafer Yatta who don't speak Hebrew, which is the language of the occupier. And the entire court, everything is in Hebrew. And it's talking about their expulsion. And they are sitting there not understanding a word. And it's really, to me, reading about colonialism and reading about the history of how these sorts of courts look like, that you have the judges and the prosecutors, and they're talking about the fate of people who don't speak the language, who have no voting rights. So just to say that, the structure itself is not a structure of justice. And even if the Israeli High Court is called the High Court of Justice, there can be no justice when this is the structure that it is built. And yeah, and then the courts, they appealed to the courts. The court said, okay, look, we're going to discuss this. If it's legal for the army to expel you from your homes in order to train on your lands. We didn't mention this, but the army declared all of Masafer Yatta as a military firing zone in 1980. So, and that was a tool to expel the residents. And they said, okay, you can go back to your homes, and we're going to discuss it and let you know. If there's a green light to expel you, so the army can train on your lands. Or no. And this actually carried on for what, Basel, 22 years, right? And the decision in May that we can get into later was, we're actually giving the army that green light to expel everybody. And if it happens, it will be the largest single act of expulsion since June 1967, basically, when a lot of expulsions happened when Israel occupied the West Bank. And since that decision, a lot has changed. And maybe you, Basel, can say.
Yeah, so since the decision, I think Israel still don't want to get as they did in 1999 to put these people in trucks and take them away as a former army doing it, and would be really hard pictures for them as a state that claiming that there is democracy and they respect human rights and humans, while they do not do at all for when it comes to the Palestinians, but they're claiming this at least for the Americans and for the EU countries. So what they're starting doing since last May until now, it's over than 1 year. So first they did two months of military exercises, and exercises and just to put pressure and just to scare out the people and to terrorize their life. And this military exercises, when it's going on, no one can literally move out of their homes when it's going on. And even if the army allow it, no one will move. Why? Because they were putting targets, for example, in the road where the people work, and they let the soldiers shoot at them. 3 tanks to 4 bulldozers were driving from a village to another above the crops between the houses, and they put expulsion in the ground and in the land, and then they expel them. And this is very scary to the residents of Masafer Yatta, because they don't know what's happening. Literally, there is a foreign army that everyone know and believe. The goal of this army just to expel them out of their homes, that using guns and military things like around their houses. So during this, for example, one day they were like shooting like big bullets from the tanks as part of their training, and one of the bullets hit a family home when the family was sitting inside their home, and they lied about it that there was nothing like shot toward the house from these tanks until we cut the metal, because homes like roof here made by metals, until we cut it like off and we took this bullet outside, and it looked like a big bullet that only comes from a tank. Then they didn't have any choice, but they still said it maybe came from the training. Like, look how the lies that they're using. Like, who else could have a tank around this area if not you? Like, what do you mean by maybe? Also, they set up like metal gates in front of two communities, and they would search like the school students and school students' bag, harassing them, asking them for IDs, preventing their teacher to enter to the villages, confiscating teachers' cars, confiscating lawyers and journalists and activists and human rights organization cars under pretext that this is like a firing zone. Like, confiscating these cars is to make it impossible for these lawyers and journalists and anyone to come and visit and stay in solidarity with this community within these like villages, in order to cut them from the world and not to prevent the people from outside to come and show at least solidarity and to sit with these families. And more important for also for us as journalists to prevent us from being able to go document and film these military exercises or the demolitions. And it's crazy how when we look from far away with zoom cameras, we see like settlers go with 4x4 cars and motorcycle and military jeeps, the only ones that moving in these communities and driving, and settlers just having fun with motorcycles on the hills and mountains, and they don't confiscate anything for them. They also did a massive days of demolitions, like over than 60 structures, homes, and properties for the Palestinians. And I want to speak about one of these demolitions that happened in November in a village called Sfai, where they come to a primary school in a normal day while the students were inside their classrooms and were like having their lessons. A convoy of occupation, the occupation military came with a bulldozer, and they ran to the doors, slammed the doors on the kids inside them, and another group of soldiers came, like start to push us away as journalists and parents, and start throw stun grenades. And it was really for me first time to witness this and document like how crazy when the first stun grenade like bombed, the kids start to open the windows of their classes and jump from it crying and rushing to their home. And like just the soldiers made a wall around this school, and the soldiers also go inside and steal the bags and the books and balloons, the chairs and the tables of these students, and really putting them inside these military trucks and cars and confiscating them. And after that, they called this bulldozer that was owned and driven by a settler who just live in a legal outpost just nearby, who just smashed this school in a few minutes. And it's crazy that we are filming this. This is what this army is doing to us, and to compare it like with the support that they're getting, at least from the United States, from the Americans' money, to be used in this way, like against to destroy our schools and homes and to prevent us to have water or electricity or to renovate. Like all our fight is to have normal life, is to have homes and water and electricity, roads and schools, just as humans. And all these billions of dollars sent to be used in this way, and still like in the U.S. government and in the Congress, people like keep saying Israel has the right to defend itself, while nothing here is done with Israel's security. Nothing is threatening their security. Like what the matter to come demolish the school? What, there's no relationship with the school and with the water well, with the house and security. All it's happening just to steal our land and to give it to the settlers. And this is what has been going on all the time, and this is what we were shouting out all the time to tell this is what's happening. This is the truth on the ground that must stop.
Thank you for all of that, and for being so clear and giving us such a clear equation at the end that the demolition of the school and the harassment of the people is not about security. It's about confiscation of land. I want to just take one second to reflect to you both what I heard you say about the last year, in particular, which is that there has been this the live fire training, the military training with tanks and live fire around the houses, on the roads around the villages. That's one thing. There have been an increase in checkpoints and in stopping people and harassing people, so that they can't get from place to place. And you're saying that that's to keep people out, people who are coming to show solidarity, journalists who would be coming to document, but also to harass, as you said, like teachers and students and lawyers, people who are coming to do the work of life in these villages. Confiscation of cars so that people really can't get around, and this is an area where cars really can matter to get from hill to hill and village to village. And then you talked about this increase in home and building demolitions, and especially this school in Sfai, and this terrifying scene of the stun grenades and the children scrambling out of the windows, and then watching their school be demolished, which is horrifying. And then also the ongoing settler violence. And so I'm going to ask you in a moment about the settler violence, but let's go back to the home demolitions, home and building demolitions for a moment, because you also talked about the demolition of the school and other structures, like a structure for sheep. So you wrote in the Nation piece, you wrote, the primary tool Israel uses is the systematic denial of building permits. And then you cited data from the Israeli NGO Bimkom, Planners for Planning Rights, where they say that out of the hundreds of requests for building permits that the Army received between the year 2000 and the year 2020, the Army denied over 99% of requests in Area C. And Area C is 61% of the West Bank, and it's the area that is where Masafer Yatta is. So will you unpack this? I imagine we might have some listener who says, well, the Army had every right to destroy those buildings because those buildings were built without permits. So unpack for us what it looks like to live in communities where the Army, you have to apply to your military occupation administration for the right to build. They deny over 99% of requests, and then the Army can demolish those buildings as they wish. Talk to us about that, the building permit regime in Masafer Yatta.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, I mean, the way I'm looking at it is that they design the law in such a way that it will be impossible for certain people to live, Palestinians, and it is very, very possible for other people, the Israelis, the settlers who are here, to flourish, to live very, very well. And this is a very cruel system, not only, at least the way for me, the way I'm looking at it, not only because of, you have people living in a village with, they're not allowed to connect to running water, so they have to bring tanks of water that might get destroyed as well and pay a lot of money. They're actually, they're paying the most for water. They pay 8 times more for a cube of water in Tel Aviv even. So because it costs, because they're not connected to the water line, and they have to take it with tractors to the villages. You're not allowed to be connected to the electricity line, even though often the electricity lines were built on your own land that was confiscated from you, and they pass over you. For example, the village of Sousie, you're sitting in your village on your private land, and you have no electricity. You have to use solar panels that often don't work, or a generator, which is also expensive. And you see the settlement next to you, and you see the electricity lines, they pass right over you, but it's illegal for you to connect to them. The roads you're not allowed. I mean, you drive in your car, and the car. I mean, I've been, just being here for the past 5 years and driving around, my car got ruined 3 times. You constantly pay for cars. It's constant because the roads are bumpy everywhere. There are rocks everywhere, and you see the roads the settlers have right next to you, right? And it's completely paved and complete. But the roads your village are illegal. So, and the reason why this is so cruel is not, at least the way I see it, not only because of these apartheid differences, but because the law, when it isn't designed that way, it's designed to make the Palestinians criminals. It's designed. It's going to say you have to. You're driving in your car and you're bringing water and you're building a school and you have to do it at night secretly, and soldiers can invade your village and stop you and arrest you as if you were a criminal, while the system is the criminal. The system that is dividing people. That is creating this apartheid, that is preventing people from the most basic rights. But the fact that they use law to do this, I think it has, this for me, it is this emotional thing of you are forcing people to live as if they were criminals, to hide from the law, because the law is a weapon that is used against them. And of course, the statistics are obvious. Like if a listener is saying, well, why do they build illegally? Well, because the army does not allow them to build legally, because the army refuses. There are thousands of requests for building permits. The army refuses all of them. It blocks off. I mean, there is only such small fraction, less than 0.5% of the land in Area C that Palestinians can access. And all of this is private Palestinian land. This is not a question of debate. The army acknowledges that Masafer Yatta is private Palestinian land, yet they do not allow its development. It's very, very clear. I mean, you have to be here to see it in your eyes, but it's a very, very clear apartheid. Yeah.
Yes, I mean the law. It's all laws in the world, like law in general, is just made to control the life of the people and to create a system for the state, for its own people. So for that, the all the legislations council in the world, like in the US, everywhere in the world, the people choose their legislator. So in order to choose the laws that controls their life, the laws that they have to respect, the laws that they have to pay the price if they are violating it. But here for us as Palestinians, like back to say, we are under a foreign army control that do everything, all the laws, only to make our existence on our land illegal, and making everything about their settlers and their settlements and outposts and farms are legitimized, and everything here is legalized. But the settlers is voting for these laws in order to expel us out from here, and they can have the water as much as they want to. For example, if you compare this today, the village of Mufaggara, where this attack happened, and the outpost of Khavat Ma'un, you would go around Khavat Ma'un, you see huge vineyard farm, a huge cow farm, a huge sheep farms, chicken farms, and cherries. This is just around Khavat Ma'un, and this is a huge farms that taking so much water every day. While the people who lives in the village of Mufaggara can't have this clean water to drink, not only to give that, not also to give a clean water to their sheep, or water, sorry, to their sheep. You understand, like today we are not in a position, you can't compare between the humans who live in Mufaggara and the cows and the sheep of the settlers and their farms, that you would pass in the night in the road next to this like farms, and you see like yellow lights lighting on these animals, and you'd go above a village and you will see how dark it is because there's no lights. So all the system here is created in order to back to say, like, to unlegitimize us, and us being the ones who's violating the laws, and everything about these settlers is legal, and the state is facilitating everything in order to build and expand. And this is how how they are killing like the two-state solution by changing the facts on the ground, by changing the de facto and the status quo on the ground in order to, and they're now saying it like clearly that we are doing this in order to prevent the Arabs to have their state next to the state of Israel. And it's not a new thing. It's like, it's a lie to say it's just because of this government, because now the settlers are in the government. It starts this idea within the start of bringing, like before they were telling the international community it's a temporary occupation until the Palestinians will be able to take their state, and then our military will leave from here. But in the 80s, they start to build settlements and bring Israeli civilians to live inside these settlements. And from that moment, there's no temporary occupation. It's a colonization project in order to wipe out Palestinian villages and to build settlements. And this have been going on now for over than 40 years that they are doing it. And each 20 years, they would take new policy that's to make it like higher and to make the Palestinian pay higher price in order to and this, like in the last 3 years, there is a massive of establishing a new outpost by the settlers. And this year, like especially, there is like 4 Palestinian communities that they left their village and they destroyed their homes by their hands and go look for another places, only because of the settlers' pogroms in the first line, and because the state is investing in these settlers' pogroms and settlers' daily harassment and settlers' physical violence against Palestinians to destroy these crops or to burning houses and cars, and like making the Palestinians living in a fear situation, that they're not in unsafety like a place, and the only way they should live. Why? Because the settlers come do what they do, and then the army don't stop it. They also come and support these settlers and back them and shoot at the Palestinians who try to defend themselves. And the police would like ask if you are speaking about law, ask how many settlers is arrested from Huwara. There was hundreds of settlers burning an entire like town. How many of them are in jail? How many of them like seeing a judge because of what they did? There was hundreds of settlers, not one settler that they couldn't know where he like doing this thing. Messiah, the same thing. There's no one single settler that's facing a charge because of burning Palestinian homes. Why? Is because the state wants this to happen in order to expel the Palestinians out. So laws here are made only to expel us out also from here.
Thank you both for all of that, and Basel for giving us the context of the recent attacks in Messiah and in Huwara and those pogroms committed against Palestinians, and the way that the army facilitates those pogroms, either in some cases, as we've seen from video and from other allegations, some soldiers actively taking part, or it not preventing the settlers, and as you said, not arresting or stopping any of them. In Masafer Yatta in particular, you just said that the last 3 years there have been a new method of outposts, and I wanted to ask you to talk about the expansion of settlements and settler violence in Masafer Yatta, and what it looks like. You started by talking about this violence of the settlers going out to where shepherds are trying to bring their sheep to feed, to have the sheep graze, and settlers coming out and harassing them and preventing them from actually being able to graze the sheep, or settlers taking over the water source. So tell us a little bit about what the expansion of settlements and the settler violence looks like in Masafer Yatta now.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we can talk about one specific community in Masafer Yatta that, right? Maybe we talk about the Widata community, yes, and what happened there. Yeah, so because this is very, very recent and very troubling. And so Widata, it's a community in Masafer Yatta, a very small community, one big family that is living on their land, a lot of children in this community. Around, there is a family that I know, like with 10 children there. And this new type of settlement that we are seeing all over Masafer Yatta and generally in the West Bank, which is called a farm outpost, which, you know, over the past 5 years, this is one of the main trends happening in the West Bank of extreme violence, which is, so settlers are allegedly receiving from the state tens and thousands of dunams of land to make these farms on. And basically, they bring a bunch of thugs to the farm. Usually, you know, it's like 6, 7 guys who are like all young, all armed. They have like M16s or pistols, and they're controlling, like, you know, they specifically choose locations that they know there are Palestinian villages of farmers and herders in those locations. And then every morning they take out a drone and they wait and look where the Palestinian herder is grazing with their sheep.
Wait, every morning they take out a drone, you said?
A drone with a camera, yeah.
A drone with a camera.
Are everywhere. Settlers are operating them everywhere now for this, to spy on Palestinians who are building. It's nice. This is they actually received last year, the settlement municipalities received tens of millions of shekels from the state to purchase these drones and have people who are doing this monitoring of Palestinians. So, and now they're going to receive even more. So this is also a state sort of issue, that they're using the settlers as a, you know, a physical way of surveillance. And these farming outposts are, yeah, taking out these drones, or, you know, waking up in the morning and taking their own sheep and just using violence. You know, sometimes it is just with loud music or with like an axe or a bat to just kick out the sheep of the Palestinian herders or attack them. And other times, often it's physical violence. There are hundreds of these attacks happening every year. I mean, there's statistics like in 2022, more than 1,000 such attacks. And this is what happened to this small community of Widade, right? This new farming outpost that was suddenly created right next to them. And settlers every morning, you know, they go to their sheep and they kick them out. One time they actually entered the village. This was on video, armed with M16s, and you see the children crying, and they threaten, you know, the father of the family. If you stay here, we're going to kill you. And he said this was not on video, but this is his testimony, that they actually came at night and they entered their home at night, and they put a gun to their heads and told them, leave this place. Now, all of this is happening when the army, the soldiers, are not only doing nothing to protect the Palestinian communities, they're actually backing up the settlers. And as Basel mentioned before, this father in Widade of the community, I think he was arrested, like, you know, a few times. Like, the settlers are entering his village and attacking him, and, you know, he's the one who is calling the army. The Palestinian is calling the army, and the army ends up arresting the victim who is being attacked. And after all of this violence, what actually happened, I don't know, I think it was a week ago or something, the family decided to leave. The family they left their land, you know, they took their stuff, the land they were born in, they've been living there for so long, and they left. And this, over the past 2 months, has happened in 4 different places in the West Bank. It happened in Ras Atin, and then Samia, which is in the Jordan Valley area. It happened in Baqa, which is a village in Nikhmas, near the Ramallah area, more in the central West Bank. And now it happened in Widade, here in Masafer Yatta area. And there are tens, if not hundreds, of communities all over the West Bank who are now facing the same sort of pressures. And this is, settler violence has existed for such a long time, but this is, you know, the way it is now. The settlers are actually entering the villages with guns. You know, they're actually, you know, it's not just happening in the fields, they're actually entering the homes of people. Yeah, and it's just, it takes so much power for so many communities to stay on their land under this extreme pressure. And when they lose the land, what actually happens, and I'll finish with this, and I mean what actually happens when, you know, usually, and this shows you just how the system works. When a Palestinian farmer or herder loses their land, it's not like they can go to another land, because Israel controls all of the farming lands. So what usually happens is they have to go to the city and rent an apartment there, and they lose their income as farmers and as herders because there is no place for them to go around with the sheep or to plant. And then what happens is, in order to make a living, they are forced to ask the army for a permit and go work in construction for Israelis in Tel Aviv and whatnot, you know, and build homes. And it just shows you how, and the settlers have the farms. So it just shows you how, like, you know, the settlers are becoming, you know, they are controlling the land. They are turning themselves into the farmers, while the Palestinians are kicked out and they go build homes for. So it's an entire complex system of oppression that's going on here. But these farming outposts, I mean, probably, is this new?
Thank you for describing it so clearly to us, and the system of what it looks like when you take people who live on land and make them landless. What happens to them after that? Basel wrote about the end of the community in Ein Samia. He wrote an article about it, and what really stuck with me in your article, Basel, when you wrote about that on 9/7/2, and of course I'll put a link into the show notes here so our listeners can see your article, is that you talked about how it affected you to witness these people dismantling their homes and as they fled settler violence. And one of the things that I'm so grateful to you, I admire both of you so much for the work that you do, and for your fortitude, your strength, and being able to face these realities so clearly every day, and to describe them, to articulate them, to share them with a broader audience. And Basel, you did that in Samia. It is such a gift for people who aren't in Masafer Yatta and can't go there and visit and see and be with you, to get to learn and understand what's happening from you and from you both so clearly and on so many levels. And so I'm grateful and thank you both for that. I wanted to ask you, you end your article with a call for solidarity, and the article in The Nation. And Basel, you said it on this podcast already in the beginning a little while ago. You talked about wanting international attention. I wanted to ask you, like, what do you want to ask of this audience? What does solidarity look like to you? What are you looking for?
To be honest, for me, it makes me crazy, as I mentioned, when I talked about the demolition school, not just solidarity. And America specifically, they need to watch their money. They need their government is playing a big role here. It's not a government that's doing nothing. They have the role. Israel today, I can see, is literally just care about the American government, whatever the government it is, a Biden administration or another one. So people in America should see what their money is doing to us. Like, aside from the military aid that they give to Israel each year, there is also 7 Israeli extremist settlers organizations that are registered in the US as charities. Regavim, one of them, and other bunch of governments. There is actually a campaign not on our team, which is in New York, and these settlers organizations getting each year $60 million from Americans to do these things to us, as they did to the family in Wadadi, the families in Ein Samia. What they're doing every day is because of your money. It's because of these millions of dollars that comes from America for these settlers to do and to dig the mountains and make them flat and to create like a huge farms on it, just to destroy this the family's life, the Palestinian family's life in these communities, and to drive them away from their land. So they need to stop and to see what their money, what their government is doing toward us here as a Palestinians living under the occupation. So this is in the first step. Should be like done by the Americans, and the solidarity is like we are calling like for two-state solution against the occupation, and the settlements are illegal. But what are you doing for that? What's this government doing for that? On the ground, the facts and the de facto are being changed by only the Israeli soldiers and settlers on the ground by expelling Palestinian families and carrying out this massive like demolitions in all over West Bank and East Jerusalem. So condemnations are not working that you are doing since all these decades. The same condemnations and the same posts are important, but are not working, and we are no one getting like a positive results from this condemnation. So it's time to do actions, to act against this in order to stop it. If you're claiming that you are protecting the international law, the human rights laws, and you're so you have to do actions in order to stop what's going on here. And I believe today all Palestinians, I'm really disappointed and hopeless more than ever. If you walk in the villages and areas, see what they're facing from the settlers, they would tell you since 50 years they never been under pressure like this. People really are hopeless. And for me, I believe today the only way is really to stop this from going on is a serious international community pressure on the Israeli government to stop it, and even to take actions against this, against the apartheid, against this system, against keep millions of Palestinians living under foreign military laws and controls.
Thank you for that, and for your honesty and clarity about what it's like in Area C today, and this sense of hopelessness. You wrote about, you've written about this as sort of a slow motion expulsion without putting people on trucks again, like they did in 1999. That would look bad for an international audience, but forcing people through pressure to use a phrase from American politics, to self-deport. This idea of that just forcing people out. Thank you for your clarity. Thank you for your continuing to do what you're doing, to report and to share. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience before we go?
For me, no. Thank you.
Yeah, for me neither. Thank you. And if you have any question, but yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I'm so truly grateful to you both for your work, for your time, for taking time. I know you're sitting at the end of a very long, hot day, and you've taken time to be with us and to share all of this with us. I want to have you back on to continue. We are going, FMEP, the foundation, has been very focused on Masafer Yatta and on how we can support people living there and resisting and trying to live normal lives under these horrifying conditions that you have just described to us so clearly. And so I'm grateful to you both for taking the time today, and I look forward to having you back on the podcast at another time. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in today, and encourage you to check out our website, www.fmep.org. We're going to have a lot of links and resources to many of the articles and reports that we mentioned today, and other webinars and podcasts. I feel like so much of what Yuval and Basel talked about today, every line could have a footnote with 10 human rights reports and articles behind it, describing in detail and with photographs and maps, so you can see all of it. You can see everything that they're talking about. And I want to encourage all of our listeners to really dig into this material and stay up to date on what's happening in Masafer Yatta, on the threats to this community, and stay up to date in general on Israel-Palestine. Check out our website for many more resources. And thank you for listening to the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. You can also watch these podcasts on YouTube. Thank you again, Basel and Yuval. Thank you to our listeners. And with that, I am Sarah Ann Minkin, signing off for now. Thank you again, and take care.